Hey everybody, I'm Brett. Welcome back to part two of our selling option series. So, in part one, we talked about selling cash secured puts. Similar to a cash secured put, now we are going to talk about selling a covered call. So, a covered call, very similar to a cash secured put, you're still talking about contracts, and each contract is worth 100 shares. So, in this case, what we're going to talk about today is you already own the 100 shares. And what you are doing is you are selling somebody else, you're selling what's called a call option. You're selling the buyer the right to purchase your 100 shares at a designated price. And in turn, they're going to give you a premium. They're actually going to pay you for that. It could be $50, could be $100, could be a couple $100, could be a couple $1,000. But either way, they're paying you for that right. And as a recap here, basically, again, you own the 100 shares, you're selling somebody else the right to buy those shares, and you're getting paid up front for it. It's called the premium. So let's talk about key terms here before we dive into an example. So, first of all, the underlying stock. So, in this case, let's say Amazon for this example. You already own the 100 shares. We're not going to go into today about poor man's covered call or using leaps to sell calls against or anything like that. We're just going to start off very basic today. So, you already own the 100 shares. If you own 200 shares, you could sell two contracts, 300 shares, etc. Strike price. This is the price at which the buyer can purchase the shares from you. So once it hits that price, that is when they can execute it and they can actually purchase your shares. The expiration. So this is the date that the option ends. After it, the deal is over, contract's dead. The premium. This is the actual money that the buyer is going to pay you up front at the time that you actually are set the contract. You actually sell the covered call. They're going to pay you that cash and it's going to hit your account. Assignment is when the buyer actually uses the option and they purchase your 100 shares from you. The good news is you still get to keep the premium. And then expiring worthless. This is what happens typically for a covered call when the stock actually stays below, we'll talk about that in a minute, stays below the agreed upon price and the contract expires worthless. You get to keep your premium and the deal's done. So let's talk about an example here. So this is Amazon. So say that you own 100 shares of Amazon. Amazon is trading at, say, $190 per share today. This is just an example. I sell one call option with a strike price of $200. So what that means, I'm selling somebody else the right to purchase my 100 shares at $200 per share. So the option expires on May 17th. That means at May 17th, the deal is done. So whatever the outcome is, deal is done on the 17th. Nothing can happen after that. Then the buyer pays me $3 per share. So that's $300 landing in my account now. It's $3 per share times 100 shares. And then finally, in return, I agree to sell my shares at $200 each if the buyer asks. So if we look at the order ticket here, the stock is Amazon, the shares owned are 100. That's what you currently own. The share price right now is $190. We are selling one call. The strike price, the agreed upon price that we would sell per share, is $200. The expiration, the day the deal would die, is May 17th. And then the premium is $3 per share, which is $300 total. So what happens next? There are three possible paths from here. So Amazon stays below $200. This means that the option is going to expire worthless. Nothing is going to be taken from you, so you don't actually have to sell your shares. And the great news is you get to keep your $300 premium. So you just made $300 just for taking on the risk that Amazon would go up really high and your shares would get called away. And either way, you got $300. Next, Amazon closes above $200. So what would happen here is that you are assigned, which means that your shares are sold at $200. So it doesn't matter even if it goes up to 210 and the total amount for all 100 shares would be $21,000. You need to sell them for $200 because that's what you agreed. You still get to keep the $300 premium though, which is great. So the money that would be landing in your account would be the $20,000 for the 100 shares, and you would still get to keep that $300. The other option is that you close it before May 17th. So you could do what's called buying back a call, or you could roll it, which means you close it, you buy it back, and then you open up another one at a different strike or a different date. You may cost less or more than the original $3 per share, but either way, once you close it out, once you buy to close that call, you're no longer obligated. You're not on the hook to sell your shares. So let's talk about the trade expiration. Let's just kind of go over everything that I just said. Let's actually look at a visual example here. So let's say that on the expiration date, May 17th, Amazon falls to 185. So on 185, on the expiration date, if it's at 185, what this means is that the shares are now worth, your shares that you already own, are now worth $18,500. You still get to keep the premium, and the ending value is $18,800. So the result is actually, in theory, you lost $200, but this is not a realized loss, because whether or not you sold this covered call, you were still going to have that loss on the shares, that unrealized loss on the shares, because you're holding Amazon shares that are now worth less than they were at expiration. But the good news is that you get to keep the $300. You, again, just made $300 just for taking on that risk. Alternatively, let's say that it goes up to let's do 210 per share. So now, say that it goes up to 210 per share. You sold the shares at $200 because that's what you agreed upon, which means that you collected $20,000. You still get to keep the premium, which is $300, and the ending value is $20,300. The result is you had a realized gain, in this case, of $1,300, taxable realized gain. So keep that in mind, that you, in theory, lost out on that extra headroom between the shares being at $200 and $210. So that is the risk that you take on selling a covered call. You agreed that no matter what, you were agreeing to cap your earnings at $20,300, as opposed to if you didn't sell the covered call in this case, and you were still holding on to your shares would actually be worth $21,000 instead of being capped at this $20,300. So you have to figure out what works best for you. This isn't financial advice. This is just me showing you how this works. Finally, let's look at the big picture takeaways here. So why do people sell covered calls? Covered calls, they create income. You're paid up front before anything else happens. A lot of people sell covered calls because if you, in theory, while stocks do generally go up over time, a lot of people kind of look at it as you may as well earn extra premium on top of the shares that you're already earning, and you're almost hedging against what happens if the shares go down a bit. At least you're making some money on it, and you're lowering your cost basis every time that you're collecting that premium and the share doesn't end up going above your strike. You don't sell it. The shares are the cover. So the owning 100 shares is what makes this promise safe to keep. The thing that's really great about covered calls is as long as you already own the shares, it's really hard to get burned by a covered call. Getting burned really is you end up selling the covered call below your cost basis. So if you ended up buying Amazon, say, at 190, but Amazon fell and you decided to go sell a covered call at 180, that's really the only way you get burned. I don't know why you would sell your covered call below your cost basis, but it's not like you're going to go into debt or own a crazy amount or owe a crazy amount if you already own the 100 shares. Your upside is capped, so that is the downside here. We already spoke about this. Your downside risk stays with you. So unlike a cash secured put where you could be assigned on the shares and the shares could just continue tanking, the shares that you own could still continue tanking in this case. But ultimately, if the stock falls, the shares fall too. It's just you already owned these shares. You're not going to be assigned any shares selling a covered call. So either way, you'll get to keep that premium, but the shares that you already own are could potentially continue to fall. And unless you sell them, it's an unrealized loss. And then it can be repeated. So that's the cool thing about this. If the option expires worthless, you can just sell another one. So you could sell weeklies, you could sell monthlies, you could sell 45 days out, whatever you choose. Just kind of a closing example here. If you think about a covered call as renting the shares out that you already own, you're really just collecting premium on your existing shares. So comparing this to a house, the house is your 100 shares, the rent is $300 premium, and the catch is the tenant may decide to buy you out if the house hits a certain price. But you get to collect the income and the premium either way. So I'd love to hear from you if this was useful, and I'm happy to do more deep dives. If you don't follow me on YouTube and Substack, please do. Link down below, and please feel free to reach out. I'm doing this for fun because I just love talking about options. I love talking about finance, investing. Please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much for taking the time, and have a great one.